Hello, Annie Creativity here, back with an update on my comp journal. I haven't updated on this one for a while. I have been taking notes and working in it. I just haven't been doing a lot of updates. And I also, with moving and getting everything together, haven't been working on many of the things across the board. But I do have some ideas moving forward in the future with these things. So thought I'd give you a little peek on what I've done. So most of this you've seen before. I'm just gonna go through. I haven't been really taking many Google Notes because once I have time to actually sit and work on this more longer and more dedicated, then lately I probably will have a lot more things I want to look up and follow up with. I'm making a lot of different things. Like this is I think coffee paper, like coffee filter. And there's different things I'm putting on the edge just to kind of make it interesting. These are a bunch of people to look into and some of their works of art. George Orwell got added another piece right here. And I have a bunch of things here that I printed out or cut out that I haven't put anywhere. So I've just kind of been storing them there. There's there's a lot of these word vocabulary stuff because I have a bunch of Reader's Digest and they always have some kind of vocabulary. So I just go through, figure out which ones I know, which ones I don't. And the ones I don't, I can look up and word map or whatever I need to do with later. But for now, I'm just kind of either storing it here or putting it on a page and just noting which ones that I am aware of. Right here. So if anything that has a check mark, I already knew. Anything with a star or words that are new to me. And that's kind of just how I've been approaching these vocabulary sheets. I think this is interesting though, because then I can go back, find a word I don't know, and kind of think of all the connotations that come with it. When would I use this? And all that kind of thing, and do a little word map. And that might help me when I'm trying to get ideas for my poetry, because then I can look at a new word and try to come up with connotations that's going to make a poem in itself. So these pages are helpful even if they're just from the Reader's Digest and glued in. I did do a update with the Robert E. Howard, so I'm not going to go over that. Talked about the sound in poetry, different ways to accomplish that, rhythm in poetry. I took a little bit of information about time loops. I just tend to enjoy the trope of time loops. I know that it's not always done well, but sometimes when they are, they're really good. So I just kind of made note of it, and then I wrote here some things to look into, that some books that have time loops in them. So that might be interesting for me to, and I might enjoy them because of that trope. So I just wrote that there. I don't know if I think I kind of went over this in the video, and it's just basically trying to develop a routine for writing. And the whole way you get better at writing is to write constantly and also to read constantly. So, excuse me, I just kind of made some notes on how I might want to accomplish that. And then here, these are different routines of some authors that I just put in there. And as I get more, I just include it. These are just dyed index cards. I haven't really been making note of when I've been writing, but I've been trying to. So I've been writing down what I've wrote, whether it's, you know, dreams, journals, poems, free writing, anything that I write, I just make a note of that I wrote that day. And there's a couple of them I forgot to note, but that helps me realize, okay, I haven't written in a while, let me get back to it. And it helps me develop a habit. So that's what I'm hoping once I get back on track, I'll write more and this will get filled up a lot. This is all just saying different ideas like good writers practice, practicing Bill's habits, and there's just a couple things that I am reading. I have a couple ebooks that I'm reading, as well as just looking on Pinterest and Googling and searching different authors and habits and stuff like that. I do have a couple how to write kind of books, I guess you can say. Just tips and ideas for how to strengthen your craft. So I do make note of some of those in here. This is my writer's block page. I have worked on here. I had some ideas, some things here, quotes. This is just, he said, write on a page that I am a writer, and basically try to believe it, because that is going to change how you approach your writing. And then here it says, if you find yourself asking yourself, am I really a writer? Then you are, because most people don't. So it's just an idea of reinforcing that, you know, imposter syndrome we have is not the real thing. Like, if we dedicate our time to writing, if we think about writing, if we're questioning what our writing is, then we are writers, and we need to basically live up to that name, produce content, and approach it as if we already have had success as writing. I know that's kind of weird approach, but you're not going to start writing until you believe that you're successful and that you can write. And you can't write unless you believe those. So it's like they just kind of go in a whole circle. So to get out of that, you just kind of visualize that, hey, I'm a writer. This is my profession. This is my dedication. This is how I'm approaching writing. And imagine that whatever you're doing is going to have some success in whatever aspect. It's success because you wrote that day, and it's success because while all the stuff you wrote didn't go towards the final draft, it got you an idea that made a whole new book or something. Like, just thinking of ideas like that, thinking of how it will be successful for you, how you're going to produce, and maintain some kind of routine. So I just kind of wrote that down as I'm going, because I do tend to struggle with that. I have imposter syndrome, as most writers do. So here was a song. I don't know if I covered this in a video, but there was a song called excuse me, Don't Dream It's Over, and they had a line, and it's talking about deluge, and I didn't know what deluge was. I've heard the song a million times, but for some reason this just stuck out at me, because I'm like, wait, what is that? So I went and I looked it up. I had some words that of definition of how that could be defined. I wrote the lyric down of what it was, and then I just did a little visual of what the lyric was trying to accomplish, and that will help me remember what the word is and what it means and what context to use it in. So I just thought that was interesting. I just did that little mapping and defining, and I used the whole page just to kind of reinforce that habit of, once I figure out a word, how to keep building onto that word, because it's going to increase the chances that I use it later on, or it might make me think of an image, a poem, another word. Like, all these things can bounce off different ideas. So I just want to keep marking and making note of these things as I go along. Here I just did ways for us to find inspiration, and there's about 15 of them. It's like finding things to smile about, staying with your pain and feeling that pain deeply, which is often what we tend to ignore or try to avoid. As humans, we don't want to feel that, but to connect to that emotion and to really write with that emotion, you have to let yourself feel these things so that you can take that with you as you're writing. Trying to go below the surface instead of staying very surface level, collecting ideas, words, metaphors, listening to music. A lot of these things are obvious or has been covered in another page, but I just thought this was more reinforcing that, and some of the things I hadn't learned yet, like trying to focus on sensory details, trying to make connections with what I'm writing, like the same old, trying something new, get out your comfort zone, and always ask what if. And that's just going to have you question things and those questioning will start to breed ideas. So that's just kind of what I just made note of. And then here are words you should be cutting out. So I just kind of glued that in here so I can remember, like, hey, when I'm writing, these words are going to come in no matter what, because it just, you know, most times you write stream of conscious. All right, I have to go back and see if I can cut any of these words. If I cut these words, will it still make sense? Most likely. So it's just a whole frame of mind that I'm trying to get myself into. And I skipped around. I don't go back and forth. I started that way, but now I just kind of find a page that kind of stands out for me. Like here, I just made a note right here, 5 habits of successful writers. And it's the same thing. It's writing every day, shutting off your inner critic, finding a ritual. So these are, it's similar things, but in a different ways that they're saying it. And then if I'm writing down the same things, I'm starting to realize, okay, well, then this is really what I need to be focusing on. It's going to force its way into my head, and I'm going to eventually make it into a habit. So that's just at least my idea of that. If I write it down enough, maybe I'll start actually doing it. But this is a book just to get me thinking, moving, whatever. It's not like something that has to be perfect for me. So I just kind of been having fun with that and forcing me to really think differently. This is just a quote by Mary Oliver. It says, keep some room in your heart for the unimaginable. And then there's a whole bunch of things that are saying you'll more likely encourage yourself to be creative if you start thinking childlike. Because as children, we don't have a lot of inhibitions. We don't have a lot of that thought of I can't do this or I can't do that. That starts to develop as you get older. So if we can connect somehow to that inner child that always has ideas, who always thinks differently. They make things up as they go in and play. If we start to kind of connect with that aspect of a child, then creativity is always going to be there. So how do you start harnessing that creativity and everything? So that's just kind of what that is saying. So this is just talking about left brain, right brain, and how the left brain, how that thinking is. And right here, it's talking about how the left brain tends to be more strategical, analytical, systematic, kind of like mathematical in a way. Like it's very, everything has a place kind of thing. It's very linear, scientific, symbolic. That's what we use our left brain for. But the right brain is the bigger picture, focusing on the nonverbal, synthetic, visual, holistic, imagination, emotional, spatial, and dimensional. That tends to be more of the creative side of the brain. So it's just kind of reminding yourself, what part of the brain are you using more often? What do you connect with more? Do you find yourself doing more left brain things or right brain things? And also makes a note here that if you go from right to left, which means you start creatively and then you go to something that's very like logical, or things that you have to do, like things you have to think a certain way with, that's going to stop that creative thought that you had started. So it's just something to be mindful of, how these two sides of our brains impact the other part of you. And it says, take care of left brain details prior to being creative. So that will be more or less likely to stop yourself from being creative, to stop yourself from losing that creativity, is by accomplishing these tasks here, where it doesn't require you to be creative. It requires you to do things in such a systematic way. That way, when you go to be creative, there's less likely to stop that train of thought, and will be more likely for you to stay in that frame of mind and be more creative and have better results. So that's just a little mapping I kind of did, just to kind of remind myself that we can often get lost in the left brain, and we wonder why we're not creative. But we have to take care of both sides of our brain, not just focusing on the one side all the time. So that's just something to remind ourselves. And I don't have, this is just vocabulary. should have kind of flagged these out, but it's alright. This is just me putting marks to a page, putting some color. This one I'm going to be working on now as I sit down. And I found this quote and it says, "Will you come travel with me? Shall we stick by each other as long as we live?" And it's from Walt Whitman. And I really love Walt Whitman and his poetry and his thoughts on nature. And I want to use that page in conjunction with this page to kind of put like some ideas, some things I really like about Walt Whitman, some of his biography and how he got to the point of where he is. Just kind of similar to how I did with the other ones, except I own Walt Whitman's book, Leaves the Grass, so there's a couple of things in there that I really enjoy, so I might like photocopy that and add it in here just to keep that in my frame of mind. I guess I keep saying that, but you know, just to be aware of that. I enjoy this. What do I enjoy about it? And really break it down. That was one of the advice was telling me. It was saying, find something you like and really break down why it is you like it. What do they do in their poem or their writing that's successful, that you feel like really connects you to the piece, so that once you break it down and find these aspects of their writing, you can start trying to incorporate it into your writing. Now, it's not so much you trying to steal their ideas and be like them purposely. I believe most of us, no matter what we are inspired by and how we work with others, because we constantly are inspired by others, and it's hard to be completely 100% original. But as we take on someone else's idea, we have a different point of view. We see things differently. So no matter how we write it, it's still going to come out through our own filter, if that makes sense. So being inspired by them, trying to emulate them, at the same point, trying to discover your own style within that frame. So I'm going to emulate them because this is successful. And then once I start getting that down, I'm going to find my own voice and basically have that filtered through my own voice, if that makes sense to you guys. So I'm definitely going to go and do some of that with Walt Whitman. And I did some fun little things like punching out on the sides just to make it different. Do I have something here? No, this is just still. Again, please don't mind the mess. I'm in the process of cleaning and organizing as we are moving as well, so just as we go along. And this is Edgar Allan Poe. So I kind of took a little mini bio of Edgar Allan Poe and made note of the different themes he used in his writing and some of his works of art, whether his stories or his poetry. He started out with a love of poetry before he started writing. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I think that that's very interesting that he was a poet more than a writer. I think sometimes when you have that style, it tends to inform your other style, if that makes sense to you guys. Like, I'm a poet, so I tend to use a little more flowery language, more metaphors, more examples like that. So when I go to write, that may come out in my writing. So it's just interesting to see what they initially grab to and how that impacts their writing style. If you know anything about Edgar Allan Poe, you know that he was obsessed with death and subconscious self and despair. Like, he used a lot of those dark gothic themes in his writing. But he really connected to the solitude, self-conscious, and how memory gets impacted. So it's just very interesting themes that he works with within his story, and he can tell really great stories and also explore these things in poems, and it resonates with you in a way, because while these themes are not a lot of themes that we really want to think about all the time, it's something that we can't help but think about as well. So I just think that the way he writes with these themes is just very grabbing and very telling of his writing style. Here I just took some notes on how he views, because he was originally the person who came up with a theory of criticism for literature, like what represents a good piece of work, a good piece of writing. How do we establish what counts as literature and what doesn't fall under that bridge? So he just wrote some notes here when he was building his essay on this. So he basically just said, you know, there has to be a unity effect on readers to be considered successful. So it has to resonate with the reader somehow. The production of the signal effort should not be left to the hazards of accident. So it's not like, okay, so I have to wait for inspiration to fall and okay, this inspired me to do this, so I'm just writing it. No, you go in there with some kind of idea of what you want this to accomplish. Where do you want this to go? Meaningful writing. Because if you go in haphazardly, you're not really connecting with your piece of work. It comes across disjointed, and it's less likely to be connecting to the reader. So this is just some ideas of what he wrote. What to learn from Edgar Allan Poe. His book wasn't widely accepted, and wasn't warmly accepted either. But he didn't let that discourage him. He kept trying, kept writing. Instead of going with the norm of how other people wrote, he thought outside the box. He wrote about topics that he found interesting. So if you enjoy your writing, then most likely others will start to enjoy the writing. So finding what things that grab your attention. Never being afraid to put your thoughts on paper. Instead of sitting on that great idea, write it. Write that idea down on paper. Because oftentimes we are the ones keeping ourselves from writing. And then believe in your work. So those are some things to take from him. And I think that was very helpful. And I enjoyed doing this research on Edgar Allan Poe. And I will probably add some more things to it. But for now, I'm satisfied with that page. I believe that's the last thing I did in this book. In regards to note taking. Give me a second to flip to make sure. Yeah, it looks like that might be the only thing, because this is the end. Okay, so we'll end there. So what I'm considered working on after going back and touching on those things that I didn't complete, I would like to take a couple words and kind of map them out. Look for connotations, look for other definitions, look for how the word is used, and just really map out that word with everything that comes to my mind. Maybe even finding out what those words, when do they come up in literature and music, and really just kind of make a note of that underneath it, and just really stick with like 1 or 2 words. That's kind of where I want to go next. I also want to do some visual boards. So take a word and then find visuals and images that I feel are connotative of that word, and make a whole 2-page spread on that. So those are 2 ideas that I'm hoping will generate more creativity and ideas from doing those exercises. So that's probably where I'm going to go next. All right, guys, thank you for sticking with me as I went through this book. I hope that other people are working on their comp books, and if they are making progress, I really hope you share it, because I really do enjoy looking at other people's artwork and ideas and research. I think that helps us both become inspired by each other. So and don't mind my nails. I was dyeing paper today. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to share this with anyone that you think might be interested in this video, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.